This season, I think we focused a lot on big picture questions you want to be asking yourself, big picture concepts that are maybe adjacent to the LSAT.
7Sage podcast for those who enjoy the finer things of the mind. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 7Sage LSAT podcast. My name's Henry Ewing, and I'm joined with my co-host,
Aastha and Henry. Now, today is the end of season 2 of the 7Sage LSAT podcast.
Woohoo!
Look at that. Happened. Time flies when you're having fun. So
Does it?
much.
When you're having fun.
When you're
yes,
having
yes,
fun.
Yes, that is true.
I really do
when you're
feel like
having
this
fun.
season flew by. Part of it's because it's a little bit shorter than last season, but part of it's just because we had a lot of what I thought were really, really good and helpful episodes. I think at the beginning of the season when we talked about what the difference would be from last season to this, a lot of it came to, the type of content and type of information that we were sharing. So last season was a lot of introductory material, getting you used to the test, getting you comfortable with the concepts, the different questions on the test. This season, I think we focused a lot on higher level, big picture questions you want to be asking yourself, big picture concepts that are maybe adjacent to the LSAT that can be really helpful.
High concept.
Like our math episode, for example, right? Or like our economics episode. Those aren't things that are fundamental to the LSAT, but I think on a higher level are really helpful concepts to understand.
7Sage podcast for those who enjoy the finer things of the mind. If
Make
you will.
a career out of slogans, sure.
Yes.
But I think it's been a really good episode. We've gotten a lot of really awesome feedback, or a good season. We've gotten a lot of really awesome feedback about the season, and I wanted to take today, for our last episode of the season, to kind of recap. We did the same thing last time, and I think it'd be fun to do it again and just talk about the different episodes and what we liked, what we thought were helpful, the most memorable moments of the season. So, Henry, ready to get started?
Yeah, why not? Season 2, Episode 1, How to Prepare for the LSAT. How do you prepare for the LSAT? It's been a while since we've taken the LSAT. I don't remember.
What do you mean you don't remember? You don't remember the most traumatic months of your life studying for the LSAT? No.
I don't know if they were traumatic. They were filled with glory. It was a righteous war.
Whenever you talk about your own LSAT journey, it's very violent. Like
Yes.
there's a lot of like talking to yourself in the mirror and hyping yourself up, and we had like a whole bit on the podcast about something about murdering goats was like a whole thing that you used.
Yeah.
You have a very violent attitude toward this test.
Yeah, it was so. Remember when they're like, men think about the Roman Empire like 3 times a day?
Yes.
I was like, that's amateur hour.
I'll be
3
honest,
times an hour,
whenever
at
I
least.
saw that bit kind of going around, I thought of you. Like, you're the first person I thought. I was like, Henry probably thinks about the Roman Empire a lot.
Yeah. Definitely a little too much, I'd say.
Goodness. But no, the How to Prepare for the LSAT episode, we did something very similar last episode. I think it was called Let's Get Started or How to Get Started or something. Or we did something similar last season. And I think the biggest difference about this season's episode and last season's is we kind of stepped away from, okay, you just yesterday decided you're going to start studying for the LSAT, now what? And we moved more so into, you've been studying, how do I adapt my plan? How do I adjust my plan? How do I make sure that I'm staying on track over the course of my entire studying? And I think that episode, alongside with episode 4, to retake or not to retake. Our titles are so ridiculous. To retake or not to retake gives anyone who's listening a lot of what I think are really helpful questions to be asking yourself while you're studying. So how should you be re-guiding your studying? How should you be refocusing or adapting your plan based on what your performance has been on the real thing or on prep tests as you go? Making sure you have a really specific goal every time you go to take a practice test. That's something we've emphasized a ton this season, to never just take a test for the sake of taking it, really making sure your studying is guided by some kind of objective.
Same with drills too, right? Like trying to
Yeah.
work on a single thing. Deciding, all right, I'm going to work on conclusion identification. I'm going to work on conditional translations. Just like giving yourself permission. Let's say you take a section and you think, I'm just going to work on translations. Okay, I messed up. That's fine. Did you mess up the conditional translations? That's what you were focusing on, and just getting used to that. So yeah, I think that was an important aspect that it's still going to be relevant no matter what. Not just on the LSAT, by the way, just in general life.
Would you look
right?
at that? This is actually a self-help podcast. So I think episodes 1 and 4 are really good to listen to together, to just, again, remind yourself of what questions you should be asking as you're studying. Something else we talked about a lot on episode 3 specifically was about timing.
Yeah.
timing is this huge, vague concept that everybody struggles with. Mm-hmm. And I think it feels frustrating to get advice that is akin to be faster and just don't, if you're struggling with timing, just don't struggle with timing, or just practice more. I don't think that's really helpful. But I really like the advice that we gave on episode 3, how to answer questions, how to skip questions, how to maybe do the section backwards, or, when to move on from certain parts of the test, or what questions you should do on your first attempt or your second attempt, and just really giving what I thought were tangible pieces of advice to move a little bit quicker, other than move quicker. What do you remember from that episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big takeaways that when it comes to timing is just to make sure you're spending, quote unquote, the appropriate amount of time for the appropriate level question. I know that sounds annoying, but making sure that, hey, look, your easy questions, you're spending less time on the easy questions, more time on the harder questions. Naturally, you're not going to know what is an easy question. Well, I might have an idea. You're not going to be entirely sure what an easy question is or what a hard question is. That's okay. The easy questions tend to be in the beginning of the section. And so knowing that you're going to be spending comparatively less time on the front end than you are going to be on the back end. So things like the 15 and 15 drill, very good for doing that, testing that. Things like spending more time on the passage for RC, devoting, and same with LG too, right? Investing time up front so you save time down the line. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the opposite of LR, where it really is though, right? RC, LG, you spend more time up front, less time on the questions. LR, you spend less time up front, more time on the harder questions. Things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, the next episode I wanted to talk about was the one that we did with Jacob from over at Admissions. I really loved that episode. I thought I honestly learned a lot just asking Jacob questions and learning about the admissions process and just understanding really kind of what role the LSAT plays in this much bigger picture of law school admissions. What kind of stood out to you from that conversation with Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, one, Jacob, great guy. He should host a podcast.
I wonder if he does. Do you think he might?
I don't know. What would that podcast be called? If
Maybe like how to get into law school or something along those lines, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, exactly.
What a terrible
part
plug.
Part of the 7Sage podcast network, right? One of the things that I liked that he talked about was how admission, because he was an admissions officer, how admissions looks at things. And it's nice hearing that information from someone who was actually in admissions than from someone on r/law school admissions. Not that I'm not dunking on Reddit. I love Reddit. I'm a Reddit addict, but that was definitely, it was good to get some of that insight. Just things about when you should apply to law school. And the one thing that I took away from that is like, try to get it in before Thanksgiving. Obviously it's not the end of the world if you don't, but before Thanksgiving it would count as like early, you could say. When certain tests are maybe too late, if you should retake, if you should cancel your score, right? A single cancel score might not be so bad. If you repeat cancel scores, it's a little bit suspicious.
Fishier,
Right, yeah, exactly. I guess one of the things that was nice is like a single thing never seemed to be too detrimental, but it's more of like the pattern was one of the things that I took away, right? Whether it's you're canceling scores or you retake. Those are where the admissions officer seems to be. I don't know, their little ears go up.
The antennas go up,
if you will.
No, I completely agree. And I think also when we're taking the LSAT and we're studying for the LSAT, I think it can be really easy to lose sight of the big picture and like what, it's a large proportion of your application, but it's not the only portion of your application.
Yeah. And
I think Jacob did a really good job kind of breaking down what law schools are considering, what other parts of your application can be important, and that, a year here and there, it's not going to make that much of a difference, right?
Yeah.
If you want to wait a little bit, that's okay, and you'll be fine. I think that was also, going back to episode 4, to retake or not to retake, kind of the biggest takeaway from what I remember our conversation being is just give yourself the time that you need to put forth the best application possible. The other thing that I remember taking away from our conversation with Jacob was how law schools will look at an applicant to see not just are they going to be a really great lawyer, but are they going to be a good fit for my school? And do they have a compelling reason to come to my school? And I think that, even when we're applying to law school, it can just feel like, oh, we're applying to law schools generally. But I really kind of walked away from it understanding the importance of making sure your application is tailored to each school that you're applying to, that you really understand why you're applying to each school that you want to go to. Rank and stuff is not the only consideration or should not be the only consideration. So
yeah.
I learned a lot.
One of the things too that I guess the more I'm remembering in this episode too that I really liked is he kind of went into, there was a lot of the lore, right, of like, oh, they decided to do the GRE and then they decided not to do the GRE, and then all these people, there was a big debate, and I'm like, I don't even know any of that.
Yeah.
Do I need to know? No, but it was an interesting listen. Go check it out, guys. Go check it out.
I totally agree. I really like that episode. Now, something else that we tackled this season was dun dun dun.
The big change.
The big change. I remember it like it was yesterday, October 18th. 3 days before my birthday.
Wow.
The LSAC decided to take away logic games. It felt a little personal, if I'm being honest.
Really?
It did.
Interesting.
Come on, 3 days before my birthday? You're going to
They
drop the logic
They were
game
definitely
section?
thinking of you.
They were thinking of me. If you're listening, LSAC, I want my birthday weekend back. Let's talk about that a little bit. We have a couple of different episodes on there on the season. We have one interview that we did with JY about the change, which was a super fun conversation. It's the second time that we've had JY on the podcast. And we learned a lot, not only about the change and what it means from his perspective, someone who's just been in the LSAT world for a very long time, but then also from 7Sage's perspective. What are we doing to address it? How are we going to make sure that our platform is still a really good way to practice for even the new version of the test? What do you remember from that conversation with JY?
Yeah, one of the things that was definitely one of my favorite episodes because we were able to get into like a little bit more content about the test and discussing the prediction right now that we're going to be maybe moving more towards more formal logic LR questions, a few more formal logic.
Oh man, I totally forgot that we
type questions.
Fully did LR questions on that episode. Yeah.
That was definitely great and informative. Of course, it's just a prediction, and as we all know, predictions sometimes don't pan out.
Yeah.
But I would definitely check that out if you're looking to maybe catch a glimpse into how at least 7Sage we anticipate the LR section to change. I would definitely check that out. So that was a lot of fun. I definitely like it when we get the opportunity to take a look at LR questions. We also talked about hey, how are you going to structure your study plan? Should you take in July? Should you take in August? Probably take in August. Right? There's not even a July test. I meant to say June.
I didn't even catch that.
Probably August. Definitely don't take in July. Something probably went wrong if you're taking in July.
Also, don't take June if it's going to be your first take. Was my biggest takeaway from that episode.
Why would you take June? Yeah, that'd be crazy. Be insane. Unless you feel really, really confident.
I mean, like if you're like, I've been studying really hard. I have gotten a 180 on the last 20 PTs that I took. June is going to be it for me. Sure. Maybe we see a lot of first time test takers in June, or a couple. But yeah, generally the advice is if you haven't started studying yet, probably best to lean towards August, depending on what your diagnostic score is. If you take a diagnostic and logic games is your worst section, which I feel like for most people is what it ends up being, give it till August. But if you, for some reason, take a diagnostic, you get a -0 on logic games and you lose all your points on everything else, maybe let's push forward for April and June. Maybe that's the plan.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
We have a second episode on the feed for season 2 about the change, which is a webinar that I did with our head of service and partner here at 7Sage, Scott. We did a webinar together. There are, we gave some information, a lot of similar information to what we talked about with JY, but we also took a lot of questions from the audience. So people asking, this is my specific situation. Here's where I'm at in my studying process. When should I take the test? Or how should I study, with the test date that I have planned? And so if you listen to that episode, you'll get the information and the things that we've released about the change, but you'll also get, the perspective of specific students, specific situations, and if your situation lines up with one of them, what Scott and I's response will be. That was a really fun webinar to do. It was, right around the time that the change had just been released and, everything that was going on. And if you're thinking about it, take in August or just want to learn more about the change, that's another good episode to listen to. Now, the last kind of chunk of episodes that we have on the feed are some, like I mentioned earlier, conceptual things that are not specifically LSAT, but still helpful to understand, to know about the LSAT, or if you want to succeed on the LSAT. So we got LSAT math, causation, and then claims about claims. Talk to me about those. What's going on?
Claims about claims was about the distinction, between normative claims, descriptive claims, how things ought to be versus how things actually are. Very useful.
Can you give me like a SparkNotes definition of those two terms?
Oh, well, I thought that was the SparkNotes definition.
Oh,
how things ought to be versus how things actually are. But yeah, I'll give you a normative claim right now. Aastha should have listened.
I was okay.
And then I'll give you a descriptive claim. Aastha didn't listen. Right? The distinction between those two, right? Should is about how you ought to have behaved. Aastha didn't listen. It's about what actually happened. And the reason why it's important to understand the distinction between those two is that you can't get a normative claim from a purely descriptive argument. Facts will never inform
just because
judgments.
I didn't listen doesn't mean that I should have.
Wow, okay. All right. Damn. Very nice. Yeah, exactly. This is a perfect example. Just because I didn't listen doesn't mean I should have listened. It's entirely true. Until you insert like a principle or a rule that says like if you don't listen, then you should listen. Something like that.
Sure.
That you should have listened. Excuse me. Yeah. So that was normative claims, and I would actually highly recommend checking that episode out. Mostly because when it comes to sufficient assumption and PSAR questions, knowing that distinction can help you eliminate a ton of answer choices very quickly. There's a lot of 5-star sufficient assumption questions where if you can pick out that there's a normative claim in the conclusion and a descriptive claim in the premises, or the premises are only descriptive, you can just hunt for an answer choice that says like should or ought. Our causation episode was quite good, actually. I think it described why causation is very tricky to track down, how the state of affairs might seem to reflect some sort of causal explanation, but it might not actually. In the case of the lice example, like historically, people noticed that healthy people had lice. And so they assumed that somehow the lice was causing people to be healthy for some reason. But it was actually the flip. It was because people were healthy, they had the optimum scalp temperature, if you will.
No, it was that their body temperature wasn't conducive to lice.
It was.
Or was
healthy
conducive.
people,
It was conducive
to lice. Whereas ill people had an unoptimal body temperature for lice.
Was that the episode that we did the clip of the congressmen speaking to each other about pollution in the ocean? Or
no, that was LSAT math, I believe.
That was LSAT math.
That was an LSAT math.
I really like that episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just an example of a bad argument where the congressman inaccurately, I guess we could say inaccurately, used a statistic to prove a certain claim when that statistic didn't really reflect anything about that claim. I believe it was the likelihood
of America's
trash entering the ocean. I'd say that it's incredibly unlikely that America's trash enters the ocean. Why? Because a lot of the ocean is not America's trash. And that's a fallacious argument, because it could be the case that 100% of America's trash enters the ocean and still makes up a very small percentage of the trash in the ocean. And so we discussed how percentages are very tricky, what you're allowed to use them for. Pretty good episode, I think.
I honestly think LSAT math was probably one of my favorite episodes of the season.
Really?
Mostly because it's a problem that I hear students talking about all the time. Of like, anytime there's an LR question with numbers, like I get all tripped up, or how can I practice questions that have numbers in them, or anytime I see a percentage, I just freak out a little bit. And I think we did a really great job in that episode of breaking down what you actually need to understand about numbers and proportions and math and whatever else. Because it's not very much, right? But if you know what you need to know, it's a lot easier to go into those types of questions with confidence and not have a meltdown anytime you see a number in an LR question. Because I know I felt that way when I was studying for the test, and a lot of the students I've worked with have felt that way. So if you also feel that way, I think episode 8 is a really good one to listen to.
Yeah.
So then I think that's it. That's the list of episodes.
Yeah. Well, that's the episodes. That's
all
she wrote.
Pause. I kind of like that's all she wrote. That's funny. So that brings us to the end of season 2. Thanks for listening. I do want to give a shout out to anybody who had the 7Sage LSAT podcast show up in their Spotify Wrapped this year.
Oh, yeah.
Spotify Wrapped came out today, the day that we're recording this. And I had somebody that I know send me a text message of her Spotify Wrapped. And she was in the top 7% of listeners for the 7Sage LSAT podcast. So congratulations. And if you are also a top listener, send us an email, and I would be thrilled to send you a pair of 7Sage socks. I would love to be able to do that if the 7Sage LSAT podcast is on your Spotify Wrapped, because I think that is just the funniest thing ever. I adore that.
Yeah. The fabled 7Sage socks.
Oh my goodness. People can't get enough of the 7Sage socks. They're wonderful.
I don't even have a pair of 7Sage socks.
What
Isn't
do you
that
mean
crazy?
you don't have a pair?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have
Nobody
one.
ever sent you a pair?
No.
Wow.
They don't like me here, you know?
I don't know how to tell you this. We'll get you some socks, don't worry. With that brings us to the end of this recap, which brings us to the end of this episode, which brings us to the end of this season. So see y'all again next time. Happy studying, everyone.
Season. Peace, guys.